Thank you for joining us for Margin Notes from the Central Church of Christ in Paducah, Kentucky. This is the final video on Genesis. We have worked our way through. If you're just stumbling on, we are coming at the end of a huge project for us here at Margin Notes. These videos started way back in 2020, where we just randomly gave notes in the margin of the Bible for some Bible class periods during the coronavirus shutdowns. We had enough reaction to that we can continue just sort of randomly, and then beginning in 2021, we decided let's be more systematic with this. Let's work through books of the Bible, and let's just start right at the beginning. So way back on January the 7th, we released a video that actually talked about some notes you might want to put in the table of contents in your Bible. And then on January the 21st, we started working our way through Genesis sort of chunk by chunk, few chapters at a time. And we have come now in the month of June to the last section, the last 4 chapters of the book of Genesis. Let me remind you, if you've never seen these before, that these are not meant to be a deep Bible study. These are just notes from the margin of my Bible. You may agree or disagree, decide to use them, not to use them, but hopefully they help you think about the text, and so we hope they encourage you. We're going to get through these notes, and then at the end we will let you know our plan going forward now that we're through with this huge first book of the Bible. And for all of you who have watched even some of these, thank you. And thank you for the feedback you've given privately and in social media and elsewhere. We truly do appreciate it. We never dreamed we'd still be doing these. We started this back in whenever it was, March or April of 2020, and it has been a joy. I will say personally, this has been one of the greatest blessings to my personal Bible study. It's kind of forcing myself to know, hey, I've got to have some stuff ready. I loved studying Genesis. Now, I record these videos way ahead of time, but I loved studying Genesis, and I'm already excited about studying, and as you'll be watching these, I'm well into the next book of the Bible. Let's get through these notes, and then we'll explain where we're going now that we are at the end of the book of Genesis. So our first note in this video comes from Genesis 47 and verse 7, and this is one you might need some room. This may not be a margin note. This may be a note you put somewhere else. But it's a theme that runs through the last part of the book of Genesis. In fact, it runs all the way through chapter 49 and really chapter 50 as well. This is where Jacob comes before Pharaoh. Genesis 47:7 says, "Then Joseph brought in Jacob his father, and stood him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh." It's that word blessed that serves as a theme. And again, this is going to be a longer note. You may want to write this somewhere else first, or it may not even go in your Bible. But this forms a theme that Jacob blesses 4 people, or really 4 groups of people, 4 personages, whatever you want to put it, in this last section of Genesis. Pharaoh here, at Genesis 47:7, he will bless Joseph in chapter 48 and verse 15. He will bless Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, in chapter 48, beginning of verse 9. And he will bless his 12 sons, also in Genesis chapter 49, verse 28, and really a huge section of chapter 49. That's just one specific reference. Now again, that is a long note, but you may just want to write out to the side something like, "Blessing is theme of last part of Genesis," or something like that. I just have the room and decided to make this little list to be looking for as I go through this last part of the book of Genesis, that this is a massive theme in that part of the book. As Jacob comes near the end of his life, he will die at the end of the book, but he spends a great deal of this last part of his life thinking about blessing people in his life. As we say each time, we hurry through these. You may want to pause the video or come back and rewatch these. We're going to move on. I love this one. Partially because it's just so human. There's an irony here. Genesis 48, verse 10, this is where Joseph is blessing Ephraim and Manasseh, that is Joseph's sons. Let's start reading in verse 8. "When Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, 'Who are these?' Joseph said to his father, 'They are my sons, whom God has given me here.' And he said, 'Bring them to me, please, that I may bless them.'" Here's the key verse. "Now the eyes of Israel were dim with age, so that he could not see. So Joseph brought them near him, he kissed them and embraced them," and it goes on to talk about the blessing. And by the way, you may want to make a list in the margin of the Bible of the steps of a blessing. There's a bunch of them as you go through this section. But the phrase that he couldn't see, his eyes were dim with age, so that he could not see. What I have in the margin of my Bible is that there's irony here in that he, Israel, also known as Jacob, had stolen a blessing due to his father's poor eyesight. And I have the reference cross-referenced all the way back to Genesis chapter 27 and verse 1. You may recall that's how Israel became the blessed one, was his father couldn't see either, and so he put on the skins and all of that stuff. And now, in his old age, he can't see all that well, and he has to be asked, who are these people? Bring them near, and he will mix them up as well. But there's just a great deal of irony in that now he can't see very well either. In fact, the Bible even says he could not see, probably meaning he had terrible, terrible eyesight instead of literally being blind, but he couldn't tell the difference in these two boys. Genesis chapter 48 and verse 21. This is a very simple one, and it's the same word twice. Verse 20 tells us that Israel puts Ephraim before Manasseh. That's how he mixes up the blessing. It's the way it's supposed to be, but it's not the way that people would have thought. The younger goes before the older. And then verse 21 says, Israel said to Joseph, Behold, I am about to die, but God will be with you and will bring you again to the land of your fathers. It's the word you, found twice in that verse, that's the key. And it's because it is a plural word. He does not say, God will be with you only, Joseph. He says he'll, maybe Southern, he'll be with y'all. He'll be with your people. So it's a promise of descendants. It's a promise of Joseph and Ephraim and Manasseh and their people, their descendants. God will be with you, and he will bring you, your descendants, to live in the land of your fathers. So just by noting that that is a plural word, he's bringing in Joseph, and probably in his mind, Ephraim, Manasseh, but also, of course, we know the account will go on, the story will go on through their descendants, and they will come into that land of promise. So a promise of descendants and a promise of those descendants coming into the land at a later date. They don't know how long at this point, but that's the way it will happen. Genesis 49 and verse 4. As Jacob is going through this talking about his sons, giving his reflections on his sons, giving some blessings from his sons, predictions about his sons. He's talking about Reuben. That begins in verse 3, and we'll read it together. Genesis 49, beginning of verse 3. Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, and the firstfruits of my strength, preeminent in dignity, and preeminent in power, unstable as water. You shall not have preeminence, because you went up to your father's bed, then you defiled it, he went up to my couch. It's really the whole verse that is in reference here. I just have unstable as water because it's such a poetic phrase, but it's really the whole verse that's the basis of this note. And that is that Israel probably has in mind the lust and adultery that Reuben commits with Bilhah, way back in Genesis chapter 35 and verse 22. We didn't have a note about that in these videos, but you can go back and read that account in those verses. And then also due to this, Reuben's descendants will take a lesser role than Joseph's sons' descendants. Ephraim and Manasseh will be much more prominent than Reuben's descendants. That's not to say his descendants won't have any, word to say or anything along those lines, but Ephraim and Manasseh's descendants will be much more prominent than Reuben's descendants. And so the unstable as water, the reference to going up to your father's bed, all of that probably specifically is talking about lust and adultery with Bilhah way back in Genesis 35. And due to that, the Reubenites become a much less prominent part of the 12 tribes of Israel. Reuben and his descendants do as time goes on. Genesis 49 verse 27, another of these, as he's talking about the descendants and his sons and their descendants. Talking about Benjamin, a very brief one, Genesis 49:27. Benjamin is a ravenous wolf, in the morning devouring the prey, and evening dividing the spoil. What would Benjamin's descendants be like? Well, at times they were going to be like a ravenous wolf. They were going to be uncontrollable. And this is fulfilled a whole bunch of times. I have, 6 times on the screens where Benjamin's descendants are the ones specifically mentioned as just being wild. I mean, it may not be the best way of putting it, but it's his descendants that are just crazy. Judges 3, Judges 5. The third one on Judges, by the way, is chapters 19 and 20, dealing with people from Benjamin, most specifically there. There's a couple references from 1 Chronicles, a couple references from 2 Chronicles, that the descendants of Benjamin are very well pictured as a ravenous wolf. They just are unhinged in a way among people. And so Jacob, in his blessing of Benjamin, is obviously correct, but he is laying down something that's going to be true multiplied times about the descendants of Benjamin. All right. Two more notes from the very last chapter of the book of Genesis. One is this notation of who takes care of Jacob or Israel's body. Genesis 50, beginning of verse 1. Let's go ahead and read the first paragraph, verses 1 through 3. Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. 40 days were required for it, for that is how many are required for embalming, and the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. Why does the Bible tell us specifically that physicians embalmed Israel? Well, maybe there's no real reason, but I think there is. And that is because there were actually professional embalmers in Egypt. And it's very possible that Joseph chose his physicians to do this work so there wouldn't be any kind of pagan ritual, pagan rite, any connection with the Egyptian deities involved in the process. They just get the job done. They would just embalm Israel as a professional courtesy. They wouldn't invoke all the Egyptian gods and all those sorts of things. That's what professional embalmers would have done because they worked for the Pharaoh. But Joseph's physicians would have just simply done the job. And is that the case? I don't know. But it certainly makes sense that the Bible twice in that verse specifically tells us that his physicians took care of this task. It wasn't it wasn't the embalmers who did it. And one more note from Genesis chapter 50 and verse 22, where it tells us about the death of Joseph. Joseph remained in Egypt, he and his father's house. Joseph lived 110 years. The book of Genesis ends with the death of Joseph, of course, but it also ends with a beautiful note of how much of a blessing Joseph was, not just to his people, but to Egypt. And that is in living 110 years. And here's why. The Egyptians considered 110 the ideal lifespan. I don't know why. I've seen some guesses, but there was something about 110 that to the Egyptians was just an ideal life. And that's exactly how long Joseph lives, is 110 years. It tells us that in verse 22. It also tells us that in verse 26, if you want to mark it in both places. But just how amazing is that this one who served Pharaoh in Egypt for all these years, but was a Hebrew, still lived what the Egyptians would have considered not just an ideal life, but an ideal life span. So there you go. It's been a journey. I've enjoyed it with you. I love the book of Genesis. There's some places where it gets ugly at times, but God is in it all the way through, and it just reminds us of His power and how He's beginning to work out His plan. Here is our plan going forward. This has not been done yet, so I'm going to have to put a caveat on this. This video, if you're watching it as it's being released, is being released on June the 10th. The plan is in 2 weeks, June the 24th, to release a video that only shows the slides of every note we have done so far, table of contents in Genesis. I don't know if that video will work or not because I'm recording this obviously before I've tried to do that. I've made one of those before and it worked, but that is the plan. Won't be me talking at all. It'll just be slide, and after a few seconds, change to the next slide. So you can go back and watch, scroll through and find any note we've done all the way from table of contents, introduction to Genesis, and Genesis 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way through 50. That is the plan. Whether or not that works, however, we will be back with you with a video like this one, Lord willing, on July the 8th, and we'll pick up the book of Exodus. Now, we are not going to go straight through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. After Exodus, we're going to actually take a break and do a very short New Testament book. But because Genesis just rolls right into Exodus, we wanted to tackle that long book as well. The plan is, Lord willing, that Exodus will take us from July through the month of October. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I believe 9 videos we'll do on Exodus. It's a little bit shorter, still 40 chapters, but that is the plan. That is the plan, as we say all the time. Plans can change. We know that from 2020, and so we hope that you find these videos helpful. But that is the plan. Again, Lord willing, in 2 weeks, if it works, we'll have a video of just the slides from Genesis that you can go through, scrub through, and watch whatever you may have missed, or maybe you just don't want to hear me talk and you may just go through and just watch them play in front of you. And then, Lord willing, July the 8th, we will release our first video on the book of Exodus. So we hope this is encouraging to you. If you like these, let us know. If you don't like them, let us know. Just be nice about it. Tell the truth in love. Ephesians 4:15. And we look forward back with you again very soon. And I've loved the study of Genesis. It's enriched my life, and I hope it has yours to some degree as well. And as always, we hope these videos encourage you to read the Bible, study the Bible, and live the Bible. Thanks for watching.